nature, it can be common to envy someone else who seems to possess better aspects of life. But what's not of nature is when one goes on about committing murders fueled by this envy. This girl ended the life of her neighbor that she had idolized and stalked for years, all in order to steal her identity. But what could fuel such profound jealousy that involves taking another person's life? And did she seriously think she could take the place of her victim? This is the story of Caroline, who envied Rachel so much that she wanted to become her by ending her life. It all begins in Kenmare Street in the wooded suburbs of Melbourne, Australia. Rachel Barber, born on September 12, 1983, was the eldest of 3 girls born to Elizabeth and Michael Barber. The pair went to great lengths to provide a safe and decent upbringing for their children. Needless to say, this was evident in Rachel's sophisticated personality. Rachel soon became interested in dancing. The family embraced artistry, so naturally, she was enrolled in the Melbourne Dance Academy and was graciously supported by her loving parents. They soon came to realize that she had an extraordinary talent for dancing, so it came to them with no surprise that Rachel wanted to pursue a career in dancing as well as modeling. In addition to her talents, Rachel stood out with her uncommon beauty. She had a set of emerald green eyes plastered onto her elfin-featured face, as well as a long and slender body frame that accentuated even more as she trained to be a ballerina. Despite being popular and confident on stage, Rachel was mostly a shy girl who preferred not to speak with strangers. Nonetheless, she was still respectful when spoken to by anyone. Living only 100 meters from Rachel's residence was a girl named Caroline Reed Robertson. In addition to being next-door neighbors, Caroline was similar to Rachel as she had 2 sisters and was a very shy girl, but the basis of her reserved demeanor was significantly contrasting to Rachel's. Behind closed doors, her family was falling apart and she was constantly surrounded by vulgar arguments between her parents. This affected Caroline, who often came across as a pessimist with extreme self-loathe. She resorted to conveying her thoughts through writings where she described herself as a pizza face with brown oily hair that nobody liked or cared about. Caroline's hatred towards herself was so severe that even her mother Gail had consulted Rachel's mother Elizabeth in desperation to help her daughter.
I had Gail crying on my shoulder with Gail's tears.
Nevertheless, Caroline didn't allow these attributes to get in the way of her getting close to the Barbers. She ended up gaining their trust to babysit the young girls. During several years, Caroline grew a particular admiration towards Rachel. When Caroline was 14 years old, the Barber family moved into a different neighborhood. At this point, Rachel's life was on a roll. She had blossomed into a young lady who was on a path to achieving her dreams by enrolling in a local dance academy called Richmond's Dance Factory. Rachel had even found acquaintances in a few of her classmates. One of them, named Manny Cariella, fell deeply in love with her, and the two were destined to be endgame. For a faint second, her life was nothing out of the ordinary. Her daily routine consisted of being dropped off at the tram station every morning. She would then take the tram to meet with her friends and head to school. After school, Rachel met with her father at the same drop-off location, and they both would be home by no later than 6:15 in the evening. This same routine was to be followed on March 1st, 1999, but what started as a regular day soon ended in an everlasting nightmare for the Barber family. Rachel revealed to her friends that she was to get her hands on a load of cash by the end of that fateful day. However, despite being constantly nagged by her friends and Manny, Rachel held back from mentioning any other detail regarding this matter. After school ended, Rachel took her usual route with her friends, but later split with them and went on a different route. The clock ticked past 6:15 p.m., leaving Elizabeth wondering about her daughter and husband's whereabouts. By 7:30 p.m. that evening, the long-anticipated call from Michael reached Elizabeth, but that brief sense of relief quickly skyrocketed into more agitation. Michael informs her that Rachel never met with him at their usual meetup spot. Considering her record of being followed by stalkers, the pair didn't waste a second to call the police and report their daughter missing. To their dismay, the police took no consideration of the severity of their situation. Instead, they suggested that Rachel had just run off. This was one of the many challenges that the Barber family was yet to face. Elizabeth and Michael were left with nothing but to take matters into their own hands. They went on distributing flyers across the town and conducting their interrogations of Rachel's close friends, including Manny. They all came forth with the same story. She had plans to earn some money and had taken a different route for this matter.
She's gone somewhere that she thought was legit. That's my gut feeling.
want Rachel back. She's missed.
By the third day, Box Hill Police Station was bombarded by an array of heavy criticism for their lack of support for the Barbers. Finally, a missing report under Rachel's name was filed. Their strategy wasn't any different from what the missing girl's parents did to gather information on their daughter. Unfortunately, both parties were left at dead ends. But soon, on March 4th, a crucial piece of evidence came to light which provided the police with a head start. A family friend named Allison had seen Rachel that unfortunate evening at the East Richmond railway station. She was accompanied by a girl, and the two were seen to be engaged in a friendly conversation. They then got off at an intersection between High Street and Williams Road. The police then requested the Barbers to provide a list with names of people that Rachel was recently acquainted with. This list included none other than Caroline herself. Despite her absence from the Barbers' life for the past few years, following the broadcasting of Rachel's disappearance, Caroline had reached out to the family on March 7th. As a part of the investigation, the police went through the Barbers' phone records before Rachel's disappearance. Coincidentally, Caroline had made 2 phone calls on February 28th, each lasting for 15 to 30 minutes. Subsequently, the police found Caroline to be the owner of an apartment near the intersection where Rachel was last seen. Finally, the distressed parents felt optimistic about finding their daughter with a former trusted entity. Bizarrely, Caroline had called in sick for work that day, but what left the police even more baffled was when they discovered she had called in sick on the day of Rachel's disappearance as well. If these events weren't suspicious enough, on March 4th, a driver showed up at her apartment to transport a statue to her father's property. The statue was extensively wrapped up in carpets and blankets, stacked up into duffel bags. It was a hard pill to swallow, but to their dismay, things weren't turning out as expected. Now the police were even more motivated to search through her apartment, so on March 12th, they finally came in contact with Caroline in an unfashioned manner. She had been lying on the floor of her bedroom, unconscious, after suffering from a seizure. On investigation of the apartment, they were soon left troubled by the discovery of a bag with undersized clothes as well as heaps of journals scattered around the apartment. The journals were filled to the brim with Rachel Barber's entire existence. These writings revealed Caroline's admiration of Rachel rather to be a disturbing obsession. Caroline had been stalking Rachel daily despite the Barbers relocating to a different residence.
I was shocked but not surprised, really, in any way. Caroline had this crazy obsession.
But what prompted Caroline to the front of the suspect list was the following chilling discovery. Her journal also contains harrowing details on how she intended to lure, drug, and dispose of Rachel, along with a birth certificate application found in the name of Rachel Elizabeth Barber. This evidence suggested that she planned to physically remove Rachel, steal her identity, and move to a new location to start a new life. And so Caroline went on to write down a well-calculated plan to lure Rachel into her apartment and kill her. Rachel was offered $100 to participate in a physiology study conducted by Caroline. She was asked not to inform anyone of these plans. Upon her arrival, Rachel was offered a slice of pizza which was drugged, but how was she to know? Caroline then asked her to shut her eyes and meditate. Within seconds, Caroline crawled up behind Rachel and strangled her with a telephone cord. On March 13th, Caroline was confronted by the police at the hospital, and she simply replied, "She is dead."
And she told me that she'd buried Rachel on a family country property.
After confirming Rachel's death, the police followed her directions to her father's property and came across a shallow grave. Buried underneath it was Rachel's decomposing body.
And I wanted her to get up close to me because I know I've got my daughter's eyes. And she would have seen Rachel's eyes in me, and maybe she would have remembered what she did.
In October 2000, Caroline was only sentenced to 20 years in prison with the eligibility for parole after serving a minimum 14-year sentence. Behind bars, Caroline felt no remorse for her crime and instead underwent several drastic changes to resemble her victim, Rachel Barber. Come 2015, despite imposing a serious threat to society due to her deranged self, Caroline was released on parole after only serving 15 years of her sentence. Remember to sub. Thanks.